Coming up on this episode.
I have a picture of us standing there. It's one of my favorite pictures ever, holding this flag before we cross the line of departure. So that flag has been with me through hell and back, through everything. And it may just be a piece of cloth that costs $15.99, but I'll tell you it's priceless to me, as I know that one is to you. That is some, if there's one thing that I had to keep from the Marine Corps, it'd be that.
Outside the Wire, War Stories.
Welcome back to Outside the Wire podcast. We're doing War Stories Volume 2. We actually extended past our time on War Stories Volume 1, so you're joining us back. We're still sitting here drinking beer and still having the same conversation. But welcome back, and we're going to jump right back into it. So I was talking about some of the nonsense with the bridge right outside of our fob, and you obviously had some, you were going to tell me about a minefield incident. So why don't you lay that story out for us? Oh, sorry. We're back with Chris from K-Bar Soap. For those of you who are just joining us, but yes, Greg, Sergeant of Marines, 0331. Chris, Sergeant of Marines,
1371.
Combat Engineer.
Yep,
First Marine. Yeah,
Engineer.
that's right.
Actually, you were First Mardiv.
First Mardiv. Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
So one of those division engineers, not just the one that built shit. So just remember that. So yeah. So minefields.
You ain't a CB.
No, definitely not. But that's part of our learning. Like, we have to learn how to do all that stuff. Like, we have to learn how to build stuff and then blow it up.
So I have a really cool story about some combat engineers, but I'll let you do your minefield story first.
Okay. Yeah, no worries. We had to clear. So I don't know if they did any kind of combat college courses with y'all before you went in 04 or anything like that, but we had a huge op pause. So we had what they told us is we had outran the Army going through the country, and we had to give them time to catch up before we made our final assault into Baghdad, right? So they had we were at this op pause, and we ran across some surface laid mines, and this is where we just so happened to need to stay. So there's a method that we had mine detectors and we had all that stuff, but you have to basically stab the ground with this fucking pick and look for mines, right? But they're all surface laid. And we were just going to sympathetically detonate them, which is put a stick of C4 primed with det cord, tie them all up, and then blow each shot. So I was in charge of one, the sergeant was in charge of another one, and then one of our assistants, my second fire team leader, was in charge of a cache. So I'm going through this minefield because I didn't want any of my other guys to go through it, and I didn't probe anything. Like, I didn't give a shit. I had primed sticks of C4 wrapped around my neck, and I was smoking a cigarette out in the middle of this minefield, just walking through it, and I'm just laying them on the mines. Like you talk about in the first episode, how it's like you just get put into something and don't give a shit. And I never will forget my gunny. My gunny was he was something else.
So I don't know about det cord, but a cigarette would not set off C4. Just for our listeners, you cannot set a C4 off with fire. You cannot set it off by banging it with a hammer. It has to be set off with a primer.
But heat and pressure, though. Heat and pressure. So you can cook food with it. You can do whatever.
Right. Yeah. You can start it on fire and it will burn, but it will not blow up.
No, but you always used to joke because you don't want to stomp it out. Right. So that's what.
Yeah. You don't want to start on fire and then stomp it off because you will be walking with a crutch for the rest
heat
of
and pressure. Yeah. If it's a whole stick, you will be pink mist. That's a whole different story.
I think we should make a shirt, just pink mist. That would be a good shirt.
Yeah. That may bring back a lot, though. That may hit people in their fields. I don't know. But but so I'm going through setting all my sticks of C4 out, and I get probably I told the guys behind me, I said, just walk in my footsteps, man, you're good. I said, we don't have time to wait for this. So I got everything set up and got all my surface. I got all my sympathetic charges laid, and I get to a certain distance, and there's this thing called a Prime Z. So it's an AP mine. It's the first one that I'd seen in country. So it's basically got 3 prongs that stick up like this. So it's basically a bouncing Betty. If you've heard of one of those.
If you've seen the movie, what's that one with Owen Wilson,
Behind Enemy Lines.
Behind Enemy Lines, right?
Yeah, the little 3 prongs.
Yep.
steps on it, it bounces. That's that mine.
And then I told everybody, I was like, oh, we're stopping. This is as far off the road as we're clearing. Like, I'm not going to have balls to keep going. It's one thing if I know it takes 220 pounds of pressure to set off this pressure plate on this AT mine. It's another thing to know that I can just, that thing.
Well, there is a big difference, and we should go into this a little bit. There's a big difference between an anti-personnel mine and an anti-tank mine. An anti-tank mine, you can walk around and dance around and fuck with all day because you don't weigh enough to set it off. An anti-personnel mine is a bad day.
Absolutely it is.
Yeah.
Because it's meant to maim, it's not meant to kill. So it's meant to take 3 people out of the fight because they got to carry somebody. So they're AP mines are nasty and super nasty. So, but I remember I had all those set up, and this is one of the things with our with the reporters embedded with us, right? So they wanted a video. We get our standoff distance to blow our shot. So we went and blowed mine. We remote detonated these. So blew mine. I had the detonation or the remote detonator with me. They're all video and all this stuff for TV. Click, mine went boom. The other sergeant, click, his went boom. The third one, nothing. And I'm standing right next to my first sergeant. Now the third one, this guy wasn't really the best. And the way you do remote firing devices, you have to swap the wires. So you have to do red to black, and then if you daisy chain, it's a little bit different. You don't just do red.
So these weren't det cord. These were
remote firing devices. So so you have a blasting cap, but then it's electronic, right?
Okay.
But his was a 155 howitzer cache. So it was a whole hole. I don't know how many was in it. So we just put a bunch of sticks of C4 in there to sympathetically detonate them all, so they couldn't use them again. So my first sergeant turns after this other dude clicks it twice, and he said, McKinney, he said, get in the track and go fix that shit. And I've never been scared. But I'm walking up on an electronic firing device, electronically, and it's a whole cache that this dude already set up, and I had to go fix it. And I realized what he did. He just wired it backwards. So then I was just like, I will never feel this. That was my saving grace. And there's some meme that's going around like about somebody messing with mines, and I won't recall it, but if it goes off, it's suddenly not my problem anymore, or something like that, because that's the damn truth, right? Like, I would never knew what hit me if all that shit went off whenever I was that close to it. But I never, like, that one instance too, just that resonated with me a lot, with just knowing what the hell you're doing over there, man. You don't think about shit like that. You don't think, in the back of your mind, you think, hell yeah, I can go at any time. And I think you got to be comfortable with that. I think you have to be comfortable with that to be good at your job.
Oh yeah. Well, and when we first got into country and we got to our FOB and we started doing patrols, we had a Marine EOD team attached to us. And these guys were cowboys. I mean, they would walk up on mines, and it was kind of like when you see that movie, The Hurt Locker. I mean, I pretty much overall would give that movie a thumbs down, but there were a few instances where I could relate to that movie. Jeremy Renner's character in that movie was similar to the Marine EOD team that was attached to us, because like he was just a wildcat, like a cowboy. Like he just went out and just soft cover. Like they didn't wear flak and Kevlar. They definitely didn't wear the bomb suit. They didn't use the robot. They drove out there, one Humvee, 2 dudes. It wasn't even an up-armored Humvee. They would just show up. They'd walk over to the whatever IED we found. And lots of times it was 155 rounds attached to det cord. Who knows what kind of triggering device. They could have been sitting on a cell phone watching us. And these guys were like, their mentality was like, this bomb is bigger than any of the protective gear that I could wear anyway. So I would rather be instantly lights out than be maimed for life. I think that was just their mentality. So we would push back to the minimum safe distance, and we would be looking at them from, I'd be up in the gun looking through the binos, watching them or whatever. And they'd like kick it. flip it over, pull it out of the dirt. They just pull the detonators out of the tip of the firing, whatever the nose. If it was a 155 and it was wrapped to the nose cone of the 155 round, they just pull it apart, pull like a Leatherman, cut that cord, whatever they were gonna do. I'm just watching them like this is the most it's just unconventional.
Yes.
Like I feel like I could have walked over there with zero understanding of an IED and done what they did.
Yeah.
But then they left, and then we got the Army EOD team, and god damn, it was like the freaking world would stop for these guys. We would see an IED, and it would be like 6 hours before they would finally clear this IED and blow it up. And I mean, they would show up, and it'd be like this big, fully up armored Humvee with like a trailer that had
fancy equipment.
the robot that would roll out. Then the robot would drive over and look at it. Then the robot would drive back, and then the robot would have whatever attached to it. And then the robot would drive back again. We're sitting there. By this time, like you're talking about falling, I'd be like, are they gonna? Oh my god, blow this goddamn IED up. And there was times where we would literally just be like, you know what, guys, I think you got it. We would drive away.
Done.
Because like you were taking way too long. We got shit to do. You're over here dicking with his IED.
But
See, our main objective with all that stuff was to blow in place, man. That's all we did.
I felt like they wanted to like get out their diary and write about what they saw and experienced and how they were feeling about this IED. And we're sitting there, for the love of God, lay a stick of C4 on it, hit the button, and see what happens, and let's go. We got shit to do. Like we were in the middle of a mission when we saw this IED. It's not like we were just driving around with nothing to do and we saw an IED and then we called you guys because we were bored and wanted to sit here for 6 hours. We were in the middle of a mission and we saw an IED and we want you to clear the IED so we can continue the mission. But if you're going to take 6 hours to clear the IED, we can no longer complete our mission. So it's kind of counterproductive. But anyways.
Take your time. We have nowhere else better to be. We'll just hang out.
I remember one time I got the order to shoot an IED with the Mark 19. And I was like, I don't think this is going to work. This is a good idea at all. This is not a good idea. Let's not do that. Let's just call it EOD. No, it did not.
Yeah.
And in fact, that happened after I had gotten wounded. And so I had gotten wounded. I went to Baghdad Hospital, the 86 Cash, and did my physical therapy. They wanted to send me to Germany. I refused. I asked them what it would take to keep me there. They told me I did it. It was this little physical PT test, basically. But I had to do physical therapy to get to the point where I could complete the test. Then they put me in a Blackhawk, sent me back home, or sent me back to my fob. And then I switched. I was no longer lead vehicle at that time. I was no longer in the Mark 19. I was on the 240 Golf, and I was with the colonel at that point. I was his gunner. And so we were driving to the Elm ASP. Did you guys go through the Elm ASP at all?
It sounds familiar, but I don't know.
So the Elm ASP was 10 kilometers by 10 kilometers, or clicks, square. And it was just a desert with these mounds in the desert that were bunkers. And then when you look at it from a distance, you just see desert with little hills. And then as you get closer, when you drive, you realize these mounds are actually cut perfectly in half. They're bunkers. And when you get in between the two mounds, and it's like if you took a big sand hill and cut it perfectly in half, and there's a little gap. And then from the distance, it looks small. But when you get up on it, these mounds are like 100 feet tall, and they got these huge, massive doors on either side, and they're actual ammo bunkers for like the Scud missiles and everything. And so we needed to go there to patrol because when Fallujah was kicking off, a lot of the supporting elements that were coming in that we had to block, they were getting all of the ammo to make all the IEDs. They were getting them from the Elm ASP because there was just so much ordnance. Like the Air Force had been doing bombing run after bombing run after bombing run, trying to blow up but the bunkers were hardened, they were underground, and all the ammo was inside the bunker. So it was like you had to manually go in. You had to manually go into each one and clear it, right? And when you cleared it, you're like, holy cow! Like I can't just. We did a detonation one time. Actually, a detonation happened while we were in the AO, and I saw this video on Instagram, and it was exactly what I experienced. Right. So we're at some like meeting with the Iraqi police, and I'm just sitting there in the gun doing my cordon while the colonel's off, talking to the police chief. All of a sudden, I see this mushroom cloud, like on the horizon, and I'm like, what is that? It looks surreal, right? And I'm like kicking I'm kicking my vehicle commander Dan in the back of the head. I'm like, hey Dan, Dan, do you see that?
Are you getting this?
Any station this net, do you see what I see? Because that looks wrong. And it is literally just this mushroom cloud growing on the horizon. And then all of a sudden I see the shockwave. And it's legit coming across the desert. And it is like this white shockwave. And I'm like kicking Dan. I'm like, what's going to happen? And dude, it hits us. And it like took the wind out of me. It was like this force of wind. It blew everything around us. It was like palm trees and sand. And I mean, it was like it hit you hard. And then after the shockwave, then you hear it, like the detonation sound followed the shockwave, like a couple seconds later. Just boom. And it was like this loud, like
a long one too.
Yeah. And that thing, dude, was so big. It literally turned into a thunderhead. Like you could see the mushroom cloud go up, and then it like started, like the weather took it. And it started like going up into the upper stratosphere and like moving across the horizon. Like it wasn't like an explosion and then it just appeared. I was like, I feel like we should be kind of worried about this. And then the battalion commander come back and he was like on the radio. And I remember him just ripping everybody, wanting to know why he didn't know what was going on. And his AO, right? Well, it turned out it was at this LMASP, and an Army EOD team had found something like 555-gallon drums of basically Comp B and blew them all up at once.
Best job in the world.
Dude.
I don't give a shit.
I was like, if it was that loud and that big and that powerful miles and miles away from where they detonated, I can't even imagine what it was like where those guys were when they set it off. But anyway, so this LMASP, the only way to get there was the ASP or Animal Supply Route Temple, but we called it I-80 Highway. And this I-80 Highway was like surreal. Like it was, you're driving down this road and it is desert to your left as far as you can see, desert to your right as far as you can see. And the road that you're on is like, it looked like basically driving across the surface of the moon. There were craters everywhere. Like, and we call it I-80 Highway for a reason. Like this road was just blown to shit because these guys were trying to protect this bunker, these Alamo Supply, ASP, Alamo Supply Point. It was bunkers. They were trying to protect it from us going and patrolling it. So they'd set all these IEDs up to keep us from going up and down this road to get to it, to, do what we had to do. And so this is our first time driving out there. And I'm in the colonel's gun, and I'm like third or fourth vehicle. And he's behind like 4 inches of glass, 4-inch thick gel plate glass. And he's in the back seat, and he's like, and I'm up in the gun, and there's 2 vehicles in front of me. And we're driving across like literally craters. So you're supposed to call it an IED. If you see it, like this, I can't call. Everything looks like an IED on this road. Like,
everything's a hole.
Everything's a hole. Everything's suspect. I'm like, let's just go as fast as we can and get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
And I remember too, one thing that was wild. So, you get the really tall, high tension power lines that are like, I don't know how tall these things are, a couple hundred feet, whatever. They're like big ass metal high tower, right? So we're driving through this desert, and all of a sudden I see these high tension power lines, and there's a tower, and it's got to be, a couple hundred feet off the side of the road. And all of a sudden I look, and the tower to the left is standing, the tower to the right side of the road has been bombed and it's crushed and it's fallen over to the side. But that means we are driving across
For power line.
power lines. And I'm like, does anybody else feel like this is a really bad idea? Something like, I feel like driving across your neighborhood power lines are bad. These are the high tension ones that are probably like 2 million volts and 7 billion amps. I don't know what it is, but like you touch that shit, you're getting vaporized, right?
Yeah.
And they're just like that bridge we talked in the last podcast. They're like, just drive over it. So remember, like these power lines were like this thick. It wasn't like driving over it wasn't like driving over a wire. It was like driving over a goddamn speed bump. And it was like, we had to like put it in low gear to get over it. It was like the thump. I'm not like, oh my God, my butthole is tighter than it has ever been. Literally air, water tight.
Hell yeah.
And so this was like our setting, right? And so we're driving along and all of a sudden we get past the power lines, whatever. And all of a sudden my colonel is like slapping me in the back of the leg. I'm up in the gun and he's sitting underneath behind in the back of the Humvee, slapping me, yelling at me. I just saw an IED. And I'm like, you what? You saw an IED? I saw an IED. He's yelling at me because I didn't see it. I'm like, I'm sorry, sir. I'm vigilant. I'm looking at everything. I am on like super high alert. Everything looks like an IED to me. I thought we were rolling fast, hard, getting the hell out of here.
Yeah.
So he wants to stop all victors, right? So we stop. There's 6 of us, 6 vehicles. And I'm third vehicle. And at this point, I was back in the 240 Golf. And the Mark 19 was a junior Marine behind me. And this junior Marine he didn't go through 031 school. He was just a line guy, right? So he's an 0311. And I had my reservations about why the hell an 11 was on a Mark 19 crew serve. I mean, it's one thing to put a 0311 on a 240 Golf. It works just like a saw. I get it. You don't need a ton of training. But a Mark 19 is a little bit different. It's an indirect fire weapon. You need to understand the T&E, traversing an elevation on it. You understand how to load it. You need to understand the max effective range. You need to understand a lot about that weapon. You're firing grenades. It's different than firing bullets.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a machine gun is a machine gun, and you need training, but it's one thing. But an automatic grenade launcher is a different animal.
It is.
So anyway, that's the gun that's behind us. So the colonel's yelling, I want the Mark 19 to shoot this IED because we didn't have enough time to call. We didn't want to call the Army EOD, right? So I'm like, I'm just sitting there. Like, I'm a corporal. He's a lieutenant colonel. I'm not going to tell him what to do, right? So we're sitting there, and I'm just trying to process this whole thing that's going down. I'm still like halfway trying to be vigilant, but all this half of my brain is shit in its pants right now. And he's like, all right, get the Mark 19 up and shoot this IED. So I'm like sitting there, I'm thinking like they're going to push off and like come up with a good idea of how to shoot this. No. We have still like 100-meter dispersion between our vehicles. So the Mark 19 is fourth vehicle, we're third vehicle, and the IED is somewhere in between us. So we're talking like 50 meters. The max effective range of the Mark 19 is like almost 3,000 meters, and it's a 40 millimeter grenade, which has an HE-DP round, which is high explosive dual purpose round. So it's got the fragmentation, but it also has the penetration of the shape charge in you know what I mean? It's like designed to be armor penetrating and also anti-personnel. So it'll frag, but also it'll also penetrate. It's a hell of a round. And that's what he's loaded up with. And
he has to have a direct hit.
Yes, we're talking you want to use an indirect fire weapon
for a direct hit.
From not a non-0331, from an 0311, who is literally 50 meters away. And that weapon doesn't arm until it's like 26 meters. So, like, I know all this stuff, but he doesn't. The colonel doesn't, and the gunner doesn't. So he's on the radio, and he's telling Vehicle 4, engage. And he's, like, getting super impatient. And I was like, finally, I was like, we're all going to die, or somebody's going to die if I don't, like, stop. And he's, like, standing outside the vehicle at this point, and I remember patting him on his helmet. Hey, sir, excuse me, sir. Like, can I buy 1 minute of your time? Just please.
Can I buy a bow?
could we have a little sidebar here? I got some questions. And he's like, and he's irritated, right? He's like, what? You're interrupting me, right? I'm like, sir, as a formerly trained 0331 who has been in some serious shit with the Mark 19 and used it effectively on target, I would like to point out some discrepancies in what you're asking him to do.
Plan.
I was like, first of all, when you go back to boot camp and we talk about the 4 weapon safety rules and like fields of fire, knowing the backblast area, also knowing what's behind what you're shooting at. I was like, if you're asking this Mark 19 gunner who's not a Mark 19 gunner to shoot in a linear direction at something at the ground, and then we're right beyond that, we're gonna get hit. And he's like, oh, so what do you suggest? And I was like, first of all, we need to push up about 1,000 yards. That vehicle needs to push off to our left flank about 300 yards. And that way he can shoot at an angle.
Different direction.
Yeah. So that way his back, what's beyond his lateral line of fire is just desert.
Yeah.
So he's like, okay, that's a good idea. So he punches off 300 yards. We punch forward 1,000 yards. I get out the binos and I'm like, I'm ready for the shit show.
How many rounds does it take?
How many licks do we get to the center of this lollipop? So first of all, we're outside the wire, right? So we should all be condition 1. So it should literally be instantaneous.
Pull the trigger.
You just pull the trigger, right?
Yeah, you're ready.
The weapon has been charged, loaded, ready to go. You should just be able to click it off safe and push the trigger. But we're like sitting there for 5 minutes. And then the platoon sergeant who is in that vehicle gets out. I can see him with the binos. He gets out of the vehicle. He's standing on top of the truck with this 0311 who's trying to get the Mark 9. And I'm like, and the colonel is losing his goddamn mind. He's like, what the fuck is going on? Why is this taking so goddamn long?
Why am I reading so fucking
So he's on the radio, literally losing his whole bearing. Goddamn, his mind is, he's yelling at everybody. And this is probably on Battalion Net, so I'm sure everyone heard this shit. And finally, you hear, dum, 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 dum. These grenades, and Mark 19, the velocity is about 700 feet per second ish. So you can actually see the grenades. You can see them. They're little black dots flying through the air. You can see them. So I'm sitting there with the binos. I hear thump, 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 and I watch, and I can see as soon as I heard it, I could tell he's high, he's long, he's high. And I can watch these grenades flying way over the road, off to my left, and they hit the deck at about 1,000 yards from where this IED, quote unquote IED, that I still don't believe was there. And you hear, right? And you hear all the explosions.
Yeah.
And I look at the colonel and I did like this little like angle thing. And I was like, what would happen if we did this and we measure where those rounds landed and where we're at right now? That shit would have landed on our head. And he looked at me and I could see the fire in his eyes, right? Just he was so pissed. He was like,
your ass, Corporal.
all victors, we are Oscar Mike. And then we just didn't speak of it ever again. And we just left and drove on. And we just left whatever that was hole in the ground. And we moved on. And we were to never speak about that moment ever again.
Why the hell? Come on, man. It's not that if it doesn't go off, like I get it, but I don't know. People would run across stuff like that they would see all the time and think that it was something because once the IED started coming about, everybody got so super hyper vigilant to them. Like if you saw a little bit of a trash bag or whatever it was always holy shit, right? I remember, I never will forget. I went on a patrol with these cats. Right, it was after we got to Baghdad, and so they'd always take 2 or 3 of us. They found an IED right across from some target house, and they wanted us to go clear it. And so I get called up. I go up there and I look. And I'm like, it was a first lieutenant. It was some platoon commander was it 3 4 or once. I can't remember who the hell it was. One of those cats we were with. And I go up there and look, and I got my little probe. I'm looking, and I was like, man, there ain't shit here. I just started digging in the ground real fast. There ain't nothing here, man. I said, move on. And they all were like, oh my God, what the hell are you doing? Like, there's just nothing here, dude. And on the way back from that patrol, dude, I'm not lying. There was no power in Baghdad. You know, obviously the power got shut down. They were burning tires and shit in the middle of the street. You know, it was a whole like very Full Metal Jacket Vietnam apocalyptic kind of look, right? It was just very weird as fuck. Like it stunk. People were shitting in the streets. But there was lights on in this one place, and it was a barbershop. And so these fucking grunts were getting their hair cut in the middle of a patrol. And I will never will forget it. There's a fucking barbershop with the lights on, and they're getting their hair cut. Like, and there's people on guard at the door. So they had their, and they literally.
So wait. Was this a Haji barbershop?
Haji motherfucking barbershop.
We're not like we're on Camp Pendleton, and there was a Marine Corps or a civilian barbershop. This is
straight Hodge. Probably a Moods that would have.
We're in the middle of a war zone, and you pause.
Yes.
Hey guys, could you do a little cordon here real quick? I just saw, but right behind us there was a barbershop, and I was kind of feeling like my fade was fucked up. So I'm gonna need to get carved up a bit because we're about to hit this objective, and I only want to hit the objectives looking good.
Well, you know just as well as I do. I don't know how it was for y'all. We couldn't shower. Like I maybe got a shower a month. I would just be maybe close to that. That's the last thing I would do is get my fucking hair cut.
It all makes sense now. I understand why you started a soap company.
Yeah.
It was
because I know what cottage cheese on your nuts smells like from first fucking hand experience. And that is not showering for a month. Sandstorms. Like, so yeah, I will never, ever, ever go a day without a shower ever again in my life. That is the worst ever. But yeah, that was how it went. And I remember we were contemplating because we were probably, I don't know, we were probably 10 or 15 clicks away from the Martyr Monument. I was there with the other sergeant that was responsible for the charge that actually did go. And we had another Marine with us. And we were contemplating popping it on the plugger. You remember the pluggers? Did y'all have those massive ass locations? Like, we didn't have Garmin's. Our pluggers were huge. Like, so it was our coordinates. So it was based on
Blue Force Tracker.
Yeah. We called it a plugger. It's probably the same thing.
So those damn things, so this was before GPSs, this was before Garmin's. Those damn things were, I guess, $200,000 each.
Those things are pieces of shit. And you can go get a Garmin for fucking $200 to work.
3 of them up.
We got hit by ADs.
Government contract.
No, I mean, like, we would get hit by an IED, and thank God all the Marines would survive. And then we would get back, like, one time it literally blew the A driver out of the truck. And then we get back in the truck and be like, oh, fuck, the Blue Force Tracker is fucked up. There's another $200,000. We got to go back to the fob and, like, try to get another one put in.
So we contemplated after that was just going back to base with just us 3. Like, fuck these guys. They're literally putting us in danger. Like, so we're standing in the shadows. Like, we're waiting for them to get mowed down, right? Because they got smart whenever we would go out on patrols. They would signal each other with AKs from rooftops. Yeah. So as soon as we'd go out on a patrol, you hear, and then as soon as we went back in, you'd hear, so they weren't stupid, right? And you're sitting there, and the only lights in town on a dark street. You're sitting in a barber chair, getting your hair cut. Like, so it goes back to the whole thing about people with EOD walking up to mines. Evidently, grunts don't give a shit. They're going to get their hair cut one way or the other, and they don't care if they get shot in the head for it. So we stayed off to the side, and we waited because I didn't want to go back with just us 3. Neither did he. We kind of, like, chilled out and waited. But, yeah, it's stuff that you would never, ever, ever expect to come into contact with that happens over there. Just never, I mean.
I wanted to circle back a little bit because that story makes fun of my battalion commander a little bit, but that wasn't my intention. My battalion commander he passed away earlier last year. And I think from my personal experience, he was probably one of the greatest Marines ever. He cared about his Marines so much. He was by far one of the most intelligent officers I've ever met. And I had the pleasure of being in his truck for half the deployment. And it was a cool thing because I was his personal gunner. So I got to hear the battalion net. I got to hear the chatter on the radio. I get to hear everything he was saying, all the important stuff. And he cared about his Marines more than he cared about the mission. Mission was priority, but he made sure that anything that we got into, he took care of us first. He was just a solid dude. I mean, like I could go on and on about how awesome my battalion commander was. So I just want to make sure, like, that was like a silly story, not intended to make fun of him at all. It was just, he's not a machine gunner, so he didn't know what the Mark 10 capabilities were. So I felt like it was my job to just pause him and say, like, hey, sir, like, we need to reassess this situation. I feel like I did my job. He was doing his job, but I just want to make sure, like, I don't want to sound like I'm talking shit about him because he's a freaking awesome leader.
We all talk shit about each other all the time. They got thick skin too. I mean, anybody that would hear it.
Well, there's probably going to be Marines from our unit that listen to this podcast, and I just want to make sure that I don't get a phone call. Be like, hey, motherfucker, are you kidding me right now? No.
Your ass.
Yeah, like, we will fight right now. No. I love that dude.
Talking shit about Mattis.
It's right. I feel like it is. I mean, to me, because we were in First Mar Div, we were under that, and our colonel reported to Mattis. So there was God, Mattis, and then our battalion commander. And you know what I mean? And then my job was to protect the battalion commander. So I was somewhere in there. And
hell yeah.
Yeah.
You were close. You were close to that, I don't know.
He was
the guy we all worship.
Yeah, he was a good dude.
I am so happy that I went in and got to serve under his leadership and that invasion and everything. I've never, and I don't know if there'll ever be somebody else that is a leader of that caliber. And I wish I don't know. There probably will be, but I'm telling you right now, my generation, Mattis is absolute shit. And I don't know any Marine that would not follow that man through the gates of hell again. If he asked him to, like, I don't know, he is that kind of charismatic, badass leader. I mean, how many quotes? I don't know. I can go on and on about that.
You could go rattle on and on and on. I mean, it was the same thing with Colonel Smith. He could literally inspire you to put aside any reservations, any fear, and literally, I mean, because he would just tell you the truth, and he would do it in a way that made sense. And he had such a way, he was so educated and so well versed in, like, the art of war and understanding, like, why we did things. And it made so much sense. And we had teased a little bit about a combat engineer's story that I wanted to get back to. And this was my battalion commander. We had been taking indirect fire, rockets, mortars, all this nonsense. We were dealing really closely with the Iraqi National Guard and the Iraqi Police Department, and there was a lot of corruption in both. They were taking advantage of the situation. They were acting like mafia and thugs, basically, and taking advantage of the local populace. And my battalion commander took Colonel Mattis's no better friend, no worse enemy, and do no harm, and hearts and minds, and all that mentality of being legit, hard-ass warriors, sturdy professionals. That was he said sturdy professionalism all the time to us. But he also wanted to do no damage. Like, when we had Army units rolling through our AO, like, those guys were low in the gun, and, they would take fire and speed up or fire in every direction to get the fuck out of there. Our battalion commander was like, I'm not having any of that. We're not going to make the evening news because a Marine shot a kid. We are positive identifying everyone that we engage with. And then once you have positive ID on a threat, you will fucking unleash hell's fury on these motherfuckers until there's nothing left. Yeah. We will literally, we called in F-18s, Cobras, Hueys. We had, all the mortar teams and our artillery. We had the howitzers, plus we had the paladin tanks that were attached to us. We would literally desecrate the enemy.
We'll flatten this shit.
Literally leave craters. And it was awesome. To see the sheer firepower of the Marine Corps in action is literally one of the coolest things ever. But at the same time, we would hold back all of that and try to make sure that we were doing no harm to the local populace. Like, we wanted to make sure that the people that lived in the area that we were patrolling, we wanted to leave that place better than when we found it. That was his whole thing. So he was awesome. But so he was talking, and because we were doing it that way, we got to know the local Shias and the sheiks and the mullahs and all these different higher ranking Iraqis that were in the area, the political leaders and the religious leaders. So for like the Iraqi population, you have the governors and the mullah, the sheiks and the mullahs. You have like the political leaders and the religious leaders. To them, like a town would have both. It would be like a mayor of your town plus the pastor of the town would work together, and people would respect them both. You could have the political and religious leader. It'd be like both of them, a pastor and a mayor, together working together. So we would speak with them both and ask them what they needed, work with them closely, and then we would provide security. We get the combat engineers if we needed to rebuild a bridge, if like one area of town was where the school and the kids were, and that was like where the thugs and the bad guys were, we would patrol that area heavily and get the bad guys out of that area and open that school back up. And they loved it. They loved us for it. In fact, right before we left, we got invited to a sheik's house, and it was like a compound. It was like we rolled in, we had dinner with the guy. He had like this whole spread across a big table, and we sat at his table. We broke bread with him. We had our interpreter, and he told us. And basically what he said was, we've been observing the area, and we can tell the difference between the Marine Corps and the Army and how you guys operate. And we can tell that the Marine Corps is about to leave RAO, and the Army is about to come in. And we want to know how much you guys get paid. And he was willing to pay us separately to stay. And I was like, wow, that has got to be one of the most powerful messages.
Job review you got ever, yes.
Yeah, that's like 5-star review from Yahoo in the area you're patrolling. Like, if these guys who are local want us to stay, then obviously we did a really good job while we're here. And that was very flattering to all of us and really cool to hear, because we lost guys over there. And to know that the guys that we lost and the 99 plus Purple Hearts that we got over there, to know that we made a difference while we were there, then it felt like it meant something, and it felt like we did it for a reason. And I left that country knowing that we did a good job. And I attribute that back to our battalion commander and his spot on leadership. And so anyway, with all this interaction with these sheiks and mullahs, we got a lot of really good intel. And for the colonel, his whole thing was like, he wanted to find the money. Because to him, terrorism was all about money. He wanted to find where the money was coming from, cut the source of the money, and the terrorism would stop, at least in our era. So one of the people that we identified that was one of the main guys that was funding the IEDs and the little small arms fire attacks that we would get, and the bad guys that were chasing around town, he owned a restaurant in town. And so he was like, good to go. We're going to show a little force, and we're going to send a message to this motherfucker who's got the money, who's funding the terrorism in this AL. And it was awesome because, again, as a corporal at that time, we didn't get a ton of information. We got like what we needed to know to complete the mission, but we didn't get like the whole picture. But then I kind of put the pieces together. But anyway, so we go out on a QRF mission. We go and we pick up, did you guys have those het haulers? It was like the heavy equipment transportation. It was like a semi truck.
OE trucks?
It was a semi truck,
Yeah,
but
whatever.
it was a semi truck, but it looked like a semi truck on crack. This thing was gigantic, and it had this trailer that had like, I don't even remember, like 48 wheels or something crazy on the back of this trailer, and it was a heavy equipment hauler. And the trailer itself had articulating wheels, so the trailer could turn around corners and
Seen
stuff.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. So these things were cool. Like I remember being like a little kid sitting up on the top of the Humvee with a machine gun, looking at the semi truck, going, "God damn, that thing is fucking cool."
Yeah, that's crazy.
And it had this. So this semi truck had this Mad Max looking bulldozer on it. This was like an armor plated. I don't know if you guys had this in the Combat Engineers. It was a monster bulldozer, but it was armor plated and it had a 50 cal mounted on it. Right. This thing was crazy
Best
looking.
dozer ever.
Yeah, this thing was like something out of like
Mad Max.
exactly Mad Max, and I'm like, again, leave it to the Marine Corps to leave me thinking like this is the coolest job ever, right? After that's why you like love and hate the Marine Corps. Like you suffer through so much bullshit, but then you have a like day like today, what I'm describing, and it is literally one of the coolest things you'd ever seen in your fucking life, and it'll be the coolest thing ever through the end of your life, and you'll remember this forever. So anyway, we drive down the road. And I don't know if you guys had this, but did the Iraqi people, like, were they scared as shit of smoke when you were there? You'd pop like a smoke grenade.
No. I
So,
don't
like, when we
remember
were in the
specific-
RAO, they had, like, this highway that we patrolled, right? And it was, like, a 2-lane highway, but they would drive it like it was a 4-lane. They would be all over the place, right?
all
Yeah.
over.
So we needed to set up a cordon around this building. We didn't know what it was. So we drive out, we find the building, we set up a cordon, we need to stop traffic. Well, the best way to stop traffic was to throw a yellow smoke grenade. And like, it was like as if Saddam had been gassing his own people and they recognized yellow smoke as gas.
Yeah.
So we throw this yellow gas, dude, and people like fly like the wind away from us. And we had miles of distance between our trucks and the vehicles that were on this highway. So they stop and they're all like just getting out of their vehicles and they're staring. They see this yellow smoke on. And we're sitting there laughing like, look at these guys. Like they're scared of this shit. Anyways, so we get the cordon set up. This dozer rolls off the back of this monster semi-truck and it starts driving over towards this building. And this building is looked like a shitty restaurant, right? Well, this restaurant was owned by this guy that had all the money. So our show of force was in broad daylight in front of all of Baghdad. We were going to flatten this guy's restaurant. So this armored bulldozer just drives through the front of the restaurant. Like people were still there. They like exited. They were like running away. And this bulldozer just drives through the front of the restaurant and proceeds to drive back and forth through this restaurant until it is nothing but a flat pile of rubble. Like nothing left of this restaurant. It was flat. And he was like, all right, load up the dozer. Let's go. And it was just like, all right, we left. And there was nothing but a crater where that restaurant used to be. And it was kind of like just a big middle finger to this guy that was funding all these terrorist acts within our AO. And I was like, man, how do you not love a colonel who does that kind of shit for not only his Marines and shows the Marines what they're fighting for and shows them like what he's willing to do, but also for the locals, because the locals knew who this guy was. And we were sending a strong message like, hey, if you're a bad guy and you're supporting bad shit in this AO, we are going to flatten your house.
We're not scared of you.
No.
But that's when I bet you
No.
immediately realized, damn, I wish I was a different MOS. Bulldozer option. Because that
Yeah.
was shit.
I was like, hey, sir, can I shoot a couple Mark 19 rounds at that too, please? Like just for the hell of it? No?
No.
Okay.
I can try to set off a landmine. Let's see if we can do that. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Speaking of,
It's such weird stuff that you run into.
so also landmines, we had some monster landmines. Did you guys run over any landmines?
Nobody. We didn't lose a single person. In my deployment in my platoon, I lost people. That I always have this flag in the background. And if anybody's ever watching, you can see the corner cut out of it.
Yep.
This flag is signed by everybody that was in my platoon. This flag means the world to me. But it was given to me by a guy that didn't make it through the first deployment, and his name's on it too. But so what I did when I got out is I bought a new flag, and it's not me disrespecting a Marine Corps flag, but I cut a piece out and I signed it a little bit of the old in with the new, and I sewed it to a new flag and I give it on. So I carry on the tradition of Marine Corps. So because how this flag made it to me, I didn't feel like I needed to give away. It's the guy who I wear the bracelet for today, and he was with a different company whenever he passed in OF1.
Yeah.
Yep, and
I got a bracelet on that I have worn this bracelet almost every single day since 2004.
yeah,
Same
and that's it.
And it's funny because this is just all this is 550 cord and a button and one of them, and this is, you know, like these I don't even know what these things are called, but you see them for sale all over the place, and I'm like, we were making these things out of 550 cord and trouser buttons before they were cool and you could buy them online.
Yep, and that turned into something big.
Yeah, but we have a flag.
Else, yeah, with Bravo, he ended up being with Bravo, and but like but he was you always pick up somebody you want to emulate right when you get in the Marine Corps. So if anybody's listening and is thinking they're going to join or thinking anything like that, if anybody that is ever contemplating joining the Marine Corps, whenever you get to the fleet, your drill instructors will play a huge role in whatever you do. But as soon as you get to the fleet, you need to find somebody that you think has their shit together and try to be like them. And that was the guy that gave me that. That was who I showed up to his squad. I showed up to his platoon. I showed up everywhere. And then before we deployed, he got transferred to Bravo. But so I wasn't even with him, and we got word that had happened. And we were in Baghdad at the Martyr Monument, and we had taken some damn. The kids they had looted the liquor plant. I never will forget. It was Dimple Rum or Dimple some bullshit liquor, and they had looted it in a cigarette factory in it was a Bath Party cigarette factory, and they were trying to sell it to us outside the Martyr Monument, and we just all the people understood the universal language of an M16 in your face means give me that shit. So so we basically got that, and we sat in a fighting hole and cheersed them with the liquor and stuff in the middle of Baghdad, because it was just so. That's when I think all that stuff finally set, like everything that we had done and everything. It's like it happens to the good ones, you know, and it is. But that's why, because I know some people watching It's a Jar is going to be like, oh, why the fuck is that? Why is it? It's unserviceable. And no, that flag, man, I fight over that.
That flag has got more. That flag's got a hole in it, but that hole means something. You know what? It's interesting. Well, so that Marine passed away.
Yeah.
And what was his name?
Dwayne Rios, Sergeant Rios.
So I had a very similar situation. You talk about Marines that inspire you to be better, teach you, lead you. So I have a very similar flag, but mine's an American flag. We had Corporal Nathan Hammond was in our unit, and this kid he was a goofball. Outside the Marine Corps, he was a goofball. He was kind of nerdy. He was like, we would go out and he was just clumsy with the ladies, and he was hilarious. I love this kid. He was outside the Marine Corps. He was training to be a pilot, and he had taken some classes, and in fact, he even took me up. He taught me how to fly a Cessna, and we would go out. Yeah, he was getting his pilot's license, and once we got done with our deployment, he was finishing it up, and he was going to finish his school and become a pilot. And so one day I was just texting him like, "Hey Nate, what are you up to?" And he's like, "Man, come down here, meet me at the little airport, and we'll." And I was like, all right. So I had my little motorcycle, and I rode down, and I met him, and he took me up in a Cessna, and he was such a good dude, right? So we get in the plane, and he shows me how to do all the pre-flight stuff, and then he takes off, or we're getting ready to take off, and he's like, because you got two yokes. The pilot, you can pilot from either side of this little plane, and this thing is little, like it was I think a Cessna 152 or something like a War. I don't know. No, a two-seater. There was two of us in there. We had to open the window to stick our elbows out. That's how little this plane was. And like the throttle looks like it's like you pull a little lever or a little knob.
Like a choke on a lawnmower or something.
Yeah. It's like, that's what it is. You pull a choke on a lawnmower. That's the throttle. And there's like the mixture and all this stuff. And I don't know any of this And he's like teaching me as we go. And he's got his headset on. I got my headset on. And we're like, he's like, push this in, push that out, take this, you know. And so I literally flew. I took off. I flew all around. And he told me to like climb to 3,000 feet because he wanted to just show me some trick or whatever. So I get to 3,000 feet. And I'm like, and I can see the little red stall light. And so I'm pulling. And this plane doesn't have a ton of horsepower. It's a little plane. And so I'm like pulling and I see the stall light, come on. And he's got his logbook and he's got his pencil and he's writing shit. And I'm like looking over at him, looking back, and I'm looking at him. So I pull it back and I stall the plane. Because I was like, I trusted him so much. Like that's the kind of relationship we had together. I trusted him so much that I knew that I could put this plane. I didn't know anything about flying. I knew I could put this plane into a stall and he would fix it. So I'm like I'm messing with him, right? I'm pulling the yoke too far back and the plane is going into a stall. Doesn't even look. He can hear the little buzzer and he like takes his hand off the pad and he like pushes my yoke forward until the plane comes out of a stall. And then he goes back to writing. He doesn't say a word to me. And I was like, yes, like this guy. And then he like did and then he taught me how to land the plane. We did all kinds of crazy, he got up there and we did all kinds of crazy weird altitude maneuvers where you like flip the plane upside down almost do a barrel roll. Like I couldn't believe the plane could do what he was making it do. And he was just so talented as a pilot, right? And we were together for a really long time. We actually did an additional school outside. We were both tow gunners, but then we did our 0331 school together. But we also additionally did Russian weapons school. So we learned RPGs, AK-47s, RPDs, and RPKs. Yeah. Learned all about that stuff. Like literally got to hands-on all of these things and got to mess with them. And it was this stuff that he encouraged me to do with him. Like it was kind of an optional course, but he was like, hey dude, come with me and do it with me. And I'm like, all right, man, like we're best friends. Like I'll do whatever. And he was just such a better Marine than me. Like I'd love to fuck around and fuck off and like have fun and just be silly. He was always like, he could turn it on and we would get outside the gate, Oceanside, Clemente, whatever. We would just get into wild shit.
Yeah.
But if we were out in the field, if we were in garrison, he was a Marine, like first class PFT always. And like, he wouldn't look down on me, but he was constantly like, dude, like, come on. Step it up a notch.
Squared up.
Always encouraging me. And it was to the point where I respected him so much that when I finally did pick up corporal, I picked up corporal after him because he was a better Marine than me. When I finally did pick up corporal, I was like, I want you to pin me. So he pinned me, and that's how much respect I had for him. So, and we were over there and we ended up getting separated, and I got put in one platoon, he got put in another. And we were walking by each other, and I would always be like, hey man, how's it going? And he would always be like super confident, right? Yeah. Well, this day he wasn't. He had this look of like something was wrong. And again, because I was always like just one of those guys that would like kind of like lighthearted, make fun of shit, whatever. I didn't take it seriously, but he looked at me and he's like, just kind of shook his head like, no, not cool or whatever. You know what I mean? And he told my other friend that he was scared. And for like, we never admitted to anyone that we were ever scared. And for him, a great Marine, to admit that he was scared, there was definitely something weird there, right?
Yeah.
And I remember and anytime we would come in and out of the gates of our FOB, we had our mobile strike teams and PSD and QRF and all that stuff. I was up in lead vehicle, and there was another Marine that I had grown up with and knew really well, and we would pass each other. And anytime we'd pass each other coming in and out of the gates, we'd throw up the peace sign and be like, just kind of like, what's up, dude?
Yeah.
And it was just like our thing. And today I threw it up. I was coming into the gate and he was leaving the gate. And I threw it up and I was like, hey, Dan, what's up? And he wouldn't make eye contact. And I was like, that was weird. And then we pull in, we go condition 4, unload our machine guns, go pull into our spot and park our vehicles. And then I got word that Nate had gotten hit by an IED and he was dead. And it crushed my world. Me and my other friend Brian were really close with Nate. We came unglued, man. It was like we couldn't believe it. And the guy that I was given the peace sign to, Dan, was going out to recover Nate's body. And that's why he couldn't give me that piece back. You know what I mean? That's why it was weird. And it was weird because Nate had he was scared because he somehow knew. He knew that something bad was happening. And he could basically tell he was going to die. And it fucked us all up. And so then Dan goes out, his platoon gathers Nate's remains. They bring him back. And as soon, I don't even know where, but I found an American flag. And he was in a body bag. He was in a trailer behind the Humvee. And we waited. And as soon as that vehicle came in, we piled. There must have been 12 Marines sitting on top of this Humvee, and Nate was in the back of the Humvee in the trailer. And we just sat there and we rode. As soon as the vehicle got in the gate, we rode on top of the Humvee and rode it all the way around the perimeter of the fob. And they drove to the chow hall because the chow hall had a freezer. And so it was very serious and solemn, and we all helped take the body bag out of the back of the trailer, bring him into the chow hall, put him into the freezer. And then I pulled the flag out of my pocket, and I laid the flag very carefully over the body bag, and I had some 550 cord on me, and I tied it up so that it would stay on his body bag. And then the little bit of excess that was left, I cut and I made a little tie, and I put it around the MOLLE weave on my flak. And I remember for the rest of the deployment, I had this little piece of 550 cord that was left over from what I tied the American flag to his body. And anytime shit would get serious, I would grab this little piece of 550 cord and I would talk to him, and I would kind of rub this 550 cord and I'd be talking to him. And so then we built a little shrine in our hooch with pictures of Nate, and I hung another flag. And so when he left, he got on the bird, the pilots actually said, they're like, this is the first time we'd actually seen a Marine leave a base with a flag already on his body. And I remember one of the crewmen on this helo say to us, this Marine must have meant something to you, because we'd never seen a flag already on a Marine, as he's passed, getting picked up. And we're like, yeah, this dude was the best. And this guy was he was the one that inspired me to be better every day about my job. And so losing him meant a ton to me. It was very sad and very serious, but it also pushed me to be a better Marine. And the flag that we hung in our hooch, I put up pictures of him and this flag and remember Nate, and we had him on this little shrine for the rest of our deployment. And then when I left, I took that flag down, and I still have that flag hanging in my garage. So I can totally understand the importance of that flag you have behind you, because I have the same flag. It's an American flag, but it's hanging on my garage. Same thing every time I see that flag. I remember Nate and everything that I had with him and what I remember because of him. And it's just, that's something that people outside the Marine Corps or outside the military will never feel that camaraderie or that importance of a person that was with you. You know what I mean?
That's it. That flag he gave that to me before we even went to Iraq. So he handed it down once he left Charlie. And so then I had it, and I've got a picture of my platoon, or my squad, on top of the Amtrak holding this flag, because it went with me through Iraq, through Egypt, through everything. It went with me every deployment that I went on. And then I had everybody sign it before we went to Iraq, like before we crossed the line of departure. So I have a picture of us standing there. It's one of my favorite pictures ever, holding this flag before we crossed the line of departure. So that flag has been with me through hell and back, through everything. And it may just be a piece of cloth that costs $15.99, but I'll tell you, it's priceless to me, as I know that one is to you. Like that is some. If there's one thing that I had to keep from the Marine Corps, it'd be that.
Yeah, for sure.
Hands down.
The stupid 550 cord I still have. I've turned it into a keychain.
Yeah.
That 550 cord I had, I still have it, and it's on my keychain in my truck. And so every day when I drive my truck, I got that little piece of 550 cord.
We're weird like that.
16 years later, I still got that 550 cord.
It's because of the symbolism that we put on some weird, or not weird, but just some like mainly insignificant object. That's what we associate it with, and we will never let it go.
Yeah.
Like never. It's very. Hot damn, we got off on a dark side there.
Well, it was dark, but it was real. I mean, I've spent a lot of time thinking about Nate, mourning Nate, remembering Nate. I went and saw his family. I went and talked to his sisters and his brother, and just really connected with them and told them, in my words, the best I could do to tell him how good of a Marine he was, and how our whole platoon did. We all showed up at his parents' house. And it was so cool to have like all of our guys show up at his parents' house together as a team after our deployment, there supporting his family and showing his mom and his brothers and sister, or his sisters and brother, and talking about them and saying like how much he meant to us. Because I think it's important here. And it was just, so I mean, it still hurts. Definitely that pain will never go away fully. But because we did right by him in such a meaningful way together as a team, I can move on from it in a healthy way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't hold it in like a dark, it doesn't make me depressed. I talk to Nate all the time, and I'll tell him like, hey man, I'm out here, I'll have a quiet moment, and I'm like, hey man, I'm out here living my life, and I want to thank you. Like, because we used to ride motorcycles together, and I'll go out for a ride on my bike, and I'll be all by myself, and I'll quietly, while I'm riding my motorcycle, think about him, and I'll be like, hey dude, because we actually had planned on going on a really long, his dad was building a custom bike for him, and Nate had got a Celtic cross tattooed on his back. And Nate's dad had that same cross painted on the tank of his motorcycle. So while we were over there, he got pictures emailed to him. He's like, dude, look at this bike my dad is helping me build. And I had already had a motorcycle, and I was like, that's awesome, dude. Let's get that bike out. Let's go for a ride. And we were like planning this ridiculous ride across the US, right?
Yeah.
And so I still, I think about that when I go for ride my motorcycle. I think about Nate, and I pretend or picture him riding with me on these rides together, and that's how I remember him. But that's, it's bittersweet, but at the same time, I cherish the ability to have known somebody that close and that well, and to have been so loved someone, because you have like your family, your girlfriend, your wife, you have that kind of love, but then you got your brother you shed blood together with, and you have that kind of love, and you love a guy who is there with you, who you shared like a common bond and shared misery and shared the suck together. That's right.
Yeah.
And you've got that guy that it's priceless. I mean, it sucks, but it's priceless to be able to have that.
It is. Definitely. I miss everything that has to do with that. I wasn't that tight with him. I looked up to him more as a leader, and I still keep in touch with his widow. I still message her. So I sent her a picture of the memorial bracelet I got. And she's like, oh my God, I want one just like that. And I'm like, all right, well, we got you. I said, and I got on the inside of it, I put Forever Family, because that's how I look at her. She's Forever Family with all of us. She has the support of all of us Marines, all of the ones that he made such an impact on, because he was. And I can't, that's probably a lot of where I get a lot of the why not me,
Yeah.
because it always happens to some of the ones we think are the best.
Yeah.
And I never viewed myself as a good one. But you talk to some of my junior Marines, I won boards. I did this. I won battalion board, got sergeant. So I wasn't like a whole, but I never viewed myself to par with him, no matter what. No matter what I did, because I still did. Fuck, I did drugs while I was in the Marine Corps. I made mistakes. Went to Tijuana, fucking raised all kinds of hell. Spent a night in jail in Riverside County Sheriff's Department. Like, I did all kinds of shit that should not have allowed me.
Okay, so hold on. I've got stories from TJ. Obviously, you got stories from TJ. That's going to be another podcast. And we'll do that in the next one for sure. The Libo risk.
God almighty. Okay, yeah. That would be a freaking hilarious one.
All right, we'll do that one next. Well,
that was a good one.
Yeah, that was a good podcast. That was some good story time. I really I appreciate you sharing, and it was good to be able to talk and get that stuff out again, because those are good memories, and I think it's important to remember that stuff, because if you don't talk about it, you don't relive it, you don't think about it, you don't share it, that stuff's my biggest way to respect the guys that we lost is to share their stories again. And I think this is an awesome platform. Now it's recorded and it's on video and in audio and saved forever. So those guys get to live on forever. So
they do, as they will. And it's coming up on the anniversary of all the stuff during the invasion, right? So it's always a time of the year where we think about all of it. And a lot of us get depressed and a lot of us do all this other different stuff. But, I always try to look at it, and we live because they don't have the opportunity to, right? So how would they have wanted us to live? Would they want us to live being assholes or being, woe is me? Or would they want us to enjoy our lives, enjoy our family, enjoy our wives, our kids, enjoy being able to be here and getting to experience the stuff that they missed out on way too young, right? So it's like, how much are we wasting our lives sweating the small shit? That's the way I try to look at it. I'm not the best at it, but that's how I try to remind myself from time to time.
Yeah, no, that's very well put. I mean, we say that all the time, that if the guys that we lost, the best way to remember them is to live and to have a good life and share their story and talk about them and make sure that their story lives on. That's how we honor them. That's how we remember them. And that's the best that we can do.
Absolutely. Damn,
well,
if we keep going, it's going to get deeper.
Yeah, no kidding, man. Well, this is a good spot to stop it. Like I said, we got some good ideas for the next one. The Libo stories will be the next podcast. And no, it was great. And so I'll say goodbye to you and thank you again for your stories and good chatting and hanging out with you.
Hell yeah.
And thanks to our listeners and our viewers outside the Wire podcast. We have the Enlisted Club is where you can check this out. And if you have comments, if you want to share your stories, we're going to start opening this up. I'd love to have other Marines be on our show or other combat veterans be on our show and share your stories, because there's countless stories out there, countless information that needs to be told, stories that need to be remembered forever and shared with people. So if you have something similar to what we just talked about tonight, comment on our podcast comment thread that's on theenlistedclub.com and get in contact with us, and we'll have you on the show and we'll let you tell your story. So thanks for watching. Semper Fi.
Semper Fi.
Out.
Sidewinder, this is Echo 5 Tango.
Echo 5 Tango, this is Sidewinder. Got your Lima Charlie.
Roger. Interrogative. Do you guys have any Slim Jims? We're starving.